welcome back to my channel. If you are new here and like the video, be sure to hit the like and subscribe button for more content. Thank you for watching. So, as most of you have figured out, I got a laptop, but that means a lot more editing opportunities are more open to me now. I have been encouraged to voice act, so I'm going to attempt this, but it might not be perfect, but please bear with me. This video was requested by Hanako-chan, which you might know as Nerdy Nekama, and if you don't, I definitely recommend checking out their channel. You won't regret it. Now let's get to the video. The newly wedded couple laughed, holding hands, running to the bedroom without a care in the world. The two stared deeply into each other's eyes, getting lost in the euphoria of their love and the beginning of their new future together. After what felt like a lifetime, yet such a short time, Daichi and Suga had finally tied the knot, saying their vows and sharing that passionate and loving kiss that they would never forget while the crowd roared in cheers, wiping happy tears. The day that the two had only imagined as kids finally became reality only after they fulfilled their dreams and careers. Daichi became the officer that served to protect people and seeked out justice, while Suga became a teacher for the younger children, teaching them morals that other teachers failed to teach while covering the material needed. So maybe that one day they could grow into charming adults. After planning out their special day and finally seeing it through their beautiful and grand service, instead of doing what newly couples typically did, or what was expected of them, they passed out once they hit the bed. There was no need to rush anything, knowing that they had the rest of their lives together. Daichi woke up first. He stared at the breathtaking sight of his husband laying on his chest, still fast asleep. The white sheets draped over them carelessly, while the cool breeze of the morning came in through the slightly cracked window, blowing through their curtains. The brunette couldn't help but smile first thing in the morning, recalling yesterday's events. They were married. Finally. Suga, rather Koshi, shuffled underneath the covers before fully waking up. Daichi smiled at the breathtaking sight of Suga stretching before settling back down on his chest. The smaller's white hair tickled Daichi's bare chest. "Good morning, Mr. Sawamura." The brunette could practically feel Koshi's smile grow. "I thought it was a dream." Daichi chuckled, rubbing his lover's shoulder. "It was real. We really got married." "We did, didn't we?" His smile widened, beaming like the very sun itself. "I love you so much, Sawamura Koshi." "I love you more, Sawamura Daichi." "That's impossible, because my love for you is bigger than the universe itself." The smaller giggled. "There you go, getting all cheesy again." "Cheesy? Me?" he gasped, teasing the latter. "You wound me." They both laughed. Normally it would be way too early for the two to even converse, let alone laugh about something, so they savored the moment. "What would you like to do today?" Suga yawned, stretching his old bones yet again. "I don't mind what we do, as long as we are together." Agreed. Although, we could do what we planned last night. Daichi narrowed his eyes while the smaller smirked, teasing his husband. "You're on." Daichi got up from the bed, kissing Koshi. "Come on! You cheated!" Daichi groaned at the repetitive words flashing the screen. Daichi defeated. Meanwhile, Koshi was on the floor laughing his heart out. "Haha! I win! That makes it 34 out of 0. Want a rematch?" The brunette pouted. "Just for me to lose again?" Well, it does bring up my self-esteem quite a bit. I'll show you. Daichi tackled the smaller to the ground, tickling his sides right where he was most sensitive and ticklish. No! Stop it! He begged in between gasps of breath from laughing. The alumni setter thrashed around, trying to escape his husband's deadly hold. Fine! I surrender! Almost immediately, the latter stopped. Heh, I win. 1 out of 34. Koshi sat up and raised his eyebrow, debating whether he should say what he wanted to or not. You're still losing, though. Already knowing what was coming, Sugawara sprung up from the floor, jetted down the hall before Daichi could reach him. The two were both adults now, but even so, just seeing how they still worked together so well and still had time to have their childish moments, it warmed Daichi's heart, and he even started to look forward to the future. Not that he hadn't already. Just with the love of his life by his side, the possibilities seemed endless. He would take it any day. And frankly, he couldn't imagine his life without him. Hey, Dai? Yes, sugar? The smaller giggled. Even though his name had changed, his husband hadn't dropped a nickname. Not that he was complaining, he in fact loved it. In all seriousness, we do need to fix this. He gestured to their empty living area with their new house. There was no coffee table or couch. They had been sitting on the floor playing games, not being so nice on their stiff backs. I guess so. We can go to that new mall. Tomorrow. I want to spend the rest of today home with you. Daichi couldn't help but blush, his cheeks deepening in a dusty rose color. It sounds like a plan. Are you blushing? No. You are so blushing! Sugawara laughed, pulling Daichi down into his chest. It's nothing to be ashamed of, love. I know. I just can't believe you make me so flustered after all this time. The smeller pulled the latter's head up. Well, you are totally lit for me. The brunette chuckled. I guess I am. They closed the distance in between their lips, moving in sync to the heated moment. I love you so much, Suga Koshi. He stared with hazy, love-struck eyes. I love you more, Suga Daichi. He cheekily smiled, showing his pearl-white teeth and dimples, making the latter fall in love all over again. Come on! Come on! The smeller giggled, dragging his sleep-deprived husband inside the store. Koshi might have been drowsy as well, but the unholy amount of caffeine running through his veins said otherwise. Daichi's hyperactive husband reminded him of a child, yet he was enlightened and wanted to have him. Slow down. Are you getting old on me? The smaller teased, but noticed something on the taller, making him gasp. Wait, is that a gray hair? A what? Daichi started running his hands through his hair, blindly trying to pick it out. No! Ko, get it off! Get it off. Pluck it! Suga got on his tiptoes, trying to look at his hair, all while of course Daichi was still moving around. Stop moving, or I can't get it! The couple moved around in the store, as such creating a scene, making people talk around them. Are they okay? Just look away. Maybe we can leave unscathed. Ow! Daichi rubbed his head in a harsh manner, trying to rub the pain away. Got it! He held up the silver strand in between his thumb and index finger, proudly showing it off. Burn that cretin. It was nothing but a small strand of hair, yet it was the beginning of the end for him. Imagine getting gray hairs. Daichi stared at his lover with an incredulous look. Love. He pointed to the full head of silver hair. Oh, come on! I was born this way. At least I don't have to worry about looking like a salt and pepper shaker. Daichi gasped. You did not just go there. Try me. Sugawara snickered at his baffled lover, crossing his arms and pouting in the middle of the store. Come on, love. We have to finish shopping. Daichi followed Suga, who had already took off after mimicking him. I do not sound like that. The taller mimicked the latter again. Daichi! Okay. The brunette rubbed his sore shoulder after the latter had harshly slapped him. What about this one? He pointed to the bright teal couch. You're asking to be scrubbing off stains within the first week. Fair enough. The two squabbled over which couch they should purchase for their very own house, and ultimately settled for a simple black leather couch. It would be very convenient for cleaning spills or food when Daichi was a messy eater, so of course, that's perfect for them. They would typically eat in the dining room, but they do like to bring snacks into the living room when watching movies together. Now, a coffee table! Right. Daichi maneuvered the holster on his side, feeling it stab in his side in a comfortable way. Even though Daichi was off duty, he was still allowed to have his gun by his side in case he has to do some off-duty work. It was typically rare for any officers too, but that doesn't mean it's impossible. Koshi prayed to any god out there that his lover never had to use it. It was a simple way of telling him that it was going to be okay, and that Daichi was okay as well. It might seem silly, but sometimes that was his only source of comfort. While Daichi was examining a coffee table with black rims and a glass exterior, Sugawara turned around, listening to what appeared to be shouting. Looks like someone's causing a scene. He mumbled, completely forgetting that it was just him only moments ago making a scene. Except the shouting almost seems angry. Suga's shouting was from laughter with his lover. This was nothing like it. The shouting made his blood run cold, shivers run down his spine, and his face paled. Never once in his life had he ever heard a voice that sounded so angry, so filled with bloodlust. Dai? His voice was so small and meek, but it was all he could muster at that current moment. Daichi seemed to notice the change of behavior in his lover. What is it, Sugar? The smeller grabbed onto his husband's sleeve of his jacket, his grip tightening as the voice grew louder, meaning it was coming closer. The brunette quickly put his arm in front of Koshi, realizing the threat. The same threat that could potentially cost them their lives. The barley man approached the couple smelling like he had been rolling in his own filth for over a decade, yet his missing teeth and wicked grin did nothing to help the mood. Silence was so loud, so threatening. The only thing that could be heard was the sudden move of Daichi moving his hand to the handle of his gun, Suga's breath hitching, and the quiet, yet noticeable ticking on the man. Is that? The silver-haired man clutched onto his lever tighter, if even possible, realizing that ticking sound was. It was a bomb. That man was gonna blow up the shopping center, with the couple inside. Hands up where I can see them! Daichi pulled out his gun, cocking it, ready to shoot if need be. It was just as before. He wasn't scared for his own life. It was rather his lovers, and their future together. If he dies, what's next? Where will their planned future go? It can't be forgotten. Daichi wouldn't let it happen. If it's the policeman. He broke into a round of sickening laughter, making Koshi feel nauseous. What's your name? My name? He clicked his tongue in annoyance. Why, Mr. Suwamura, I can't believe you forget me. Forget you? He raised his eyebrow curious, yet he didn't let his guard down. Who are you? Who I am isn't important, but who I will be. Now that's a different story. It wasn't making any sense. What was happening? Why are you dodging my questions? Listen, Mr. Suwamura. He spat bitterly, his own saliva spewing out of his mouth through the gapes of his teeth. All you need to know is that I will be known as the one that takes everything that you love from you, including your own life. Daichi raised his gun higher, level with the man's head. It would be an easy shot, but he couldn't shoot. Why couldn't he shoot? Why was the fear so blinding? Who was this man? Daichi! It was Sugawara's voice that snapped him out of his trance. We have to go. There is no reasoning with this man. The smaller was helplessly yanking on his lover's arm, begging him to move as the ticking from the man's bomb that was strapped to his waist quickened its pace. Unfortunately, they were on the other side of the store, and it appeared that there were no emergency exits. Illegally, of course. At the worst possible timing, too. Weren't emergency exits supposed to be used in times like these? Suga silently cursed whoever designed this building, and his short legs that were barely able to keep up with Daichi, who had finally snapped out of his mind and ran ahead, holding Suga's hand, while the other held his gun. With their belongings long left behind, they made a break for the front exit and almost made it out when a loud bang was heard, echoing in the furniture store. Sugawara shrieked while Daichi pulled him in close, trying to block whatever that was coming. Luckily, it was only a warning shot. Not so fast. Mr. Suwamura, I thought you knew better by now. Daichi stared with bewildered eyes. How had the man from the back of the store already come up here when he didn't even run? Maybe there was more than one man. But with a bomb strapped to them? The brunette narrowed his eyes, studying his appearance. No, it was the same man. But something felt off, maybe even familiar. Daichi gasped as recognition struck his features. You are under arrest for aggravated assault, arson, drug possession, vandalism, and attempted murder. Daichi shoved the handcuffed man into the back of the police car. My, quite the number of offenses. You... The man narrowed his eyes at the badge on the officer's uniform. Suwamura. Daichi turned towards the deranged man. You'll pay for this. One day I'll tear you from your loved ones. I'll make you suffer like I did. I'll make you wish you were never born. Okay, that's enough of your blabbering. Daichi rolled up the window, rolling his eyes as the same curses he heard on a daily basis. Each criminal had said the same thing, yet none were ever able to stay true to their word. That was until now. Daichi stood face to face with that same criminal a year later. How had he gotten out of jail? If you remember correctly, he had at least 20 years before his next trial to determine if he spent the rest of his life behind bars. So, how? How did you get out? This time it was Daichi that spat out bitterly, trying his best to intimidate the man, although the slight tremble in his voice made him fail miserably. Tick. Between the man's sickening laughter and the hushed whispers from Suga from behind him, the brunette's mind was going haywire. There was only one thing left to do. Daichi reached behind him and grabbed his lover's hand, and he wrote with the tip of his index finger what the plan is. It was so familiar because these plans were the same ones as from their volleyball matches. Tick. The smeller stared at his husband with wide eyes. You can't be serious. Daichi slightly turned his head to meet those same hazel brown eyes that had a trace of fear in them. It was something that he tried so hard to prevent from happening, but even that proved to be impossible. Tick. Their plan usually meant in their matches to go, but in this case, run. Daichi was planning on distracting the man while Suga was told to make a run for it. Just trust me, Ko. Tick. I do trust you, but I'll be right behind you. Tick. Koshi couldn't help but notice the fibs from a mile away, and that made him falter. Tick. Come on, go! Tick. But... Tick. We don't have time for this. Tick. Running out of time, Daichi shoved Sugawara out of the building, hoping to at least get him away from the blast. The ticking stopped. But in return, a huge explosion took over the absence of the noise. Suga's head hit hard onto the concrete. He cringed, feeling the warm liquid ooze from his head. Although that was the least of his concerns. He looked up. Ears were still ringing, so he couldn't process any sounds. But he didn't need his ears to see the horrifying sight in front of him. The building that he was just in only seconds ago was now in flames, almost unrecognizable. Daichi? He broke into a fit of coughing after inhaling a little too much smoke. He felt hands grabbing at him, trying to pull him up and brought to safety where paramedics were waiting to help him. But his mind and legs were telling him to go back into the building. Where was Daichi? Why couldn't he see him? He said he would be right behind him, so... Where was he? Koshi's breath was shaky, almost shallow. Even his old limbs felt numb. Daichi! The more he thought about it, the more he forgot. He couldn't even remember why they were in the store to begin with. Was it because he hit his head too hard? Was it the trauma? More questions piled into his head with no one to give the answers. Each time he thought about him, thousands of needles pierced through his skull, the pain almost unbearable. He hadn't even realized he was dragged away from the scene. Far away from the building. Far away from Daichi. MIA. It's code for officers who are missing in action. Or, Suga's words, it's just a way of sugarcoating the fact. Daichi was dead. No one could survive that. Not even his husband. Koshi stared blankly on the white tiled floors with red rimmed eyes with the gauze covering his forehead. He sat at the station being questioned on what had happened while fidgeting with his fingers. After hearing the supposed MIA, Suga shut down. Almost completely unresponsive. Which was understandable, everything was going great. He had just married the man that he had dreamed of marrying for years, only for this to happen days after their wedding. Everything was going so good, so why? Why did all of this happen? How did it even happen? How can you just sit back and do nothing? How could they sit back and do nothing? A spark of rage overcame Sugawara's entire being. Nothing but pure disgust was given to the officers who did nothing but swat away the problem. The station was corrupted, full of even more corrupted people. How could you just casually push Daichi away? We are just doing our job. It was unfortunate what happened to Daichi, but in the end, he was also doing his job. When other people called for backup, no one came. Daichi was left to fight that man all alone. Now he couldn't bring himself to finish that sentence. Look, he's not dead. Don't give me that bull. I'm not stupid. Daichi was a great officer, better than any of you. Don't link us in with that newbie. Right, Daichi had only recently transferred over to the station. It's true. He is so much better than any of you. At least he had morals. He always thought on the spot on how to save as much people as he could. Because of him, there was no casualties. Suga broke into a round of tears while the officers stared in silence and remorse. At least he wasn't a coward. He was... His voice trembled and lip quivered, and the round of fresh hot tears spilled over. He was a hero! He shouted, as much as he could keep his enraged front, as mentality begged him to let go again. The love of his life was gone, snatched away from him. It was as if someone had snatched his heart out of his chest, leaving nothing but an empty void. No. Maybe that would have been better. That way he wouldn't feel the pain that he was in. His misery couldn't even begin to describe how he felt, because he knew deep down that no matter what he did or said, Koshi could never bring back his husband. All that was left of him was his memories and his officer badge. He clenched onto the tiny plaque of silver in between his hands. Surrender ID. He was really gone. I'm leaving. Wait, we haven't finished questioning you. Let him go. We will set a time tomorrow. Suga ignored the two storming out of the station, letting the cold winter air sting his tear-stained cheeks. Daichi. He looked up at the sky, seeing the first snowflakes of the season fall. It was supposed to be with Daichi that he saw these snowflakes with. The first snowfall as Newlyweds, but they never got the chance. Suga had been what people called dark, but it had never been so dark. Not even a ray of light could shine through. He was cold, and not just from the chilly weather outside. He was empty and numb, but at the same time, all he could do was try to remember what had happened, but it came to a blank. The life he had built together with Daichi was destroyed. The brunette had gone to a place that the latter couldn't go, or rather, couldn't find. Could there truly be a day beyond what had happened today? Suga couldn't believe anything, and he didn't know what was true anymore. No matter how he looked at it, he couldn't find a direction he was supposed to go. For the first time in a decade, he was all alone. Suga fell against the side of the cold building, the bricks rubbing his ribs raw. Eiichi, please come back to me. The first thing he noticed was the smell of rotten flesh and smoke. His throat burned, practically begging for water. Every time he tried to move, his limbs ached in protest. What had happened? He rubbed the dry blood from his eyes, taking in the bright sunlight through his extra sensitive eyes. The next thing he noticed was the immediate drop in temperature. His mind took ages to process everything and what had happened. He turned his head to the side, only to be met with a nauseating sight of what was left of the man. Well, that explained the smell of rotten flesh. But he couldn't move. He had only hoped and prayed to any god out there that his lover Koshi had made it out. Even Daichi wondered himself, how had he survived that? How was he gonna get home? Well, that was an actual mess. This was definitely interesting and experimental as I was hoping. Let me know how you liked it and if I should continue voice acting. Thank you for watching. As always, if you'd like to be kept up to date, check out any of my social medias. I hope that you all have a wonderful day or evening.